Welcome to a series of brief digressions on my favorite historical figures associated with archery, hence the title Marcin's Favorite Historical Figures. These are short, bite-sized tales about individuals from various eras and walks of life, spanning the spectrum of wealth and spirit alike. My little chats are not meant to be comprehensive biographical or historiographical studies. Instead, they are intended as signposts for those curious and seeking inspiration in your own explorations and research. So, if you have a few minutes to spare, I invite you to join me for a fireside-style chat in Winning Paths. Eugen Herrigel. The name doesn't stride confidently through history's corridors. It lingers instead in its dimly lit corners, somewhere between the poetry of a fleeting idea and the stern weight of unyielding reality. You won't find him leading armies or reshaping nations. His was not the bombastic life of a hero, but rather the delicate, contradictory dance of a seeker, an archer, if you will, aiming for the invisible. And while his story bears the fingerprints of greatness, it is shadowed by the frailties of the human spirit, by choices that make one wince and ponder. Born in 1884 in the green heart of Germany's Palatinate, Herrigel seemed destined for a quiet life of academia. He entered a world already rumbling with the distant thunder of collapse, the old empires rotting at the seams, the notion of Europe's infallibility cracking under the weight of its hubris. It was a time for questions, not answers, and Herrigel, a professor of philosophy, took these uncertainties with him when he journeyed to Japan in 1924. At first, his task was conventional. Herrigel was there to teach philosophy, to export the intellectual rigor of the West to a nation opening its doors to modernity. Yet, as fate often conspires, it was Herrigel who found himself a student, not of academics but of archery, a form so different from the European traditions of hitting targets that it verged on the mystical. Kyudo, the Japanese way of the bow, would reshape not just his understanding of the bowstring, but of existence itself. Kenzo Awa entered Herrigel's life like a whispered riddle. A master of Kyudo, Awa was no mere instructor. He was a poet in motion, a man for whom archery was not a skill, but a practice, an act of meditation, a path to enlightenment. The bow must shoot itself, he told Herrigel, and the words must have felt like an assault on Herrigel's Western sensibilities. What did that mean? How could a bow, inert and lifeless, shoot itself? And yet, Herrigel stayed. The lessons began simply, as such things always do: stand, breathe, draw. But the simplicity was a deception. Every step was layered with an unseen complexity, an invitation to strip away not just error but ego. Awa would insist on the purity of motion, the absence of force. The right art, Herrigel would later write, is purposeless, aimless. The more obstinately you try to learn how to shoot the arrow for the sake of hitting the goal, the less you will succeed. At first, Herrigel resisted. Of course he did. Resistance is the reflex of the uninitiated. He aimed for the target with the determination of a man clutching at control, and each time the arrows wavered. Frustration boiled. Nights stretched long. He was, after all, a scholar, a man accustomed to wielding his intellect like a blade. But the bow is no blade. It is a mirror. Months turned into years. Herrigel's arms ached, his pride cracked, and then, one day, the moment came, the moment of surrender. He let go, not just of the arrow, but of the need to direct its flight. The shot was perfect. Herrigel described it as if he were merely a witness, watching some otherworldly force guide the arrow. It shoots, Awe had said, and now Herrigel understood. This moment became the heart of Herrigel's Zen in the Art of Archery, a slim, haunting book that has lingered on bookshelves since its publication in 1948. It is both a memoir and a meditation, a work that transcends the technicalities of archery to speak to something far deeper, the human struggle to find grace amid tension. He writes of the bow as a paradox, a tool that demands both effort and effortlessness, focus and release. Yet, Herrigel's story does not end in triumph. It falters. When he returned to Germany in the 1930s, Herrigel found himself swept up in the ideological tides of the era. He joined the Nazi Party, a fact that cannot and should not be ignored. For all his talk of enlightenment and selflessness, Herrigel failed to confront the moral atrocities of his time. How do we reconcile this? How does one who sought unity with the cosmos align himself with a regime of hatred and division? The question troubles me deeply. I admire Herrigel's insights, yet I cannot separate them from his failings. And perhaps I shouldn't, for isn't this the human condition, to be both profound and fallible, enlightened in one breath and blind in the next? But let me return to the Tao, to the thing itself. Herrigel's exploration of Kyudo resonates not because it offers easy answers, but because it mirrors the complexities of life. Archery, as he came to understand it, is not about the arrow's flight, but about the archer's transformation. It is an art of stillness amid chaos, of finding harmony in the tension of opposites. In today's world, dominated as it is by metrics and measurable outcomes, Herrigel's lessons feel almost rebellious. We live in an age that worships targets, career goals, fitness goals, social media goals, and judges us by how often we hit them. Herrigel reminds us to let go, to trust in the process rather than the result. For me, Herrigel's story is personal. I have stood at the shooting line, bow in hand, the world narrowing to the taut string and the waiting arrow. There is a peculiar magic in that moment, a stillness that hums with potential. It is both exhilarating and terrifying, a reminder that control is an illusion. When the arrow flies, it carries not just your aim, but your doubt, your fear, your very self. Herrigel understood this, even if he didn't always live it. His life was a contradiction, yes, but so is archery. To shoot an arrow is to embrace tension and release, to hold the bow steady while trusting the arrow to find its own path. And here's the thing. Life is no different. We all pull the string, trembling with the weight of our hopes and fears, and then we let go, knowing full well we might miss. But perhaps missing isn't failure. Perhaps the act of shooting, of trying, despite the uncertainty, is its own form of grace. Herrigel's journey, flawed as it was, offers this reminder. Mastery is not about perfection, but about presence. The bow demands your attention, your humility, your willingness to stand in the stillness and face yourself. And while Herrigel's legacy is tarnished by his moral compromises, his insights into the human condition remain. As I sit with his story, I find myself thinking not of targets or trophies, but of the moments in between, the quiet hum of the string, the brief silence before the release. It is in these moments, I think, that we glimpse the essence of archery, and perhaps of life itself. Herrigel's life was no straight arrow. It bent and wavered, much like our own, but even in its imperfections, there is something to be learned, not how to hit the target, but how to stand at the line, bow in hand, and aim with the fullness of who we are. And isn't that the point?